to 61. Now for your Wednesday, a beautiful day, sunshine highs of around 80, partly cloudy upper 70s on Thursday. It's time for Riverbend, June 9th through the 17th. Discounted admission now at area Circle K locations. Savings on tokens at Food City. With more information at their website, riverbendfestival.com. And I'm Storm Team 12's Chief Meteorologist, Patrick Moore. On Nooga Radio AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Martin Truex Jr. is off the pace and he is headed to the pit lane. Elliott Powers around the outside. Michael McDowell pops a right front tire. Here's Martin Truex to the bottom. Blaney blocked him off too. Meanwhile, Chase Elliott went 4 wide on the back straightaway. They're side by side for the lead.
Hear it live on Chattanooga's official NASCAR radio station.
Nooga Radio, AM 1240, 92.7 FM.
The voice of NASCAR.
Well, Heidi, hey, hey, hey. And I can tell you, I've only ever said that in Chattanooga. They would lynch me for saying something like that down here. What does that actually mean, Patrick, when Southerners go, Heidi, hey, 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 hey?
Oh, that's just a greeting. No big deal.
Just a greeting?
Yeah.
I am so happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
My man, Patrick Core.
Yeah, good to be here.
You hear him on the radio like 3-4 times an hour doing the weather, the accurate weather forecast. This show, this hour, is on climate change. Mm-hmm. And I put that in quotations.
Yeah.
Because climate change used to be global warming, global cooling. Patrick's a scientist and a meteorologist. Everyone knows Patrick from Channel 12. You can check this out on YouTube. You feel comfortable with the camera, don't you, Patrick?
Yeah, pretty much so.
Facebook, there's another camera. Mm-hmm. And then the microphone, of course. TuneIn Radio, NoogaRadio.com. Our second biggest audience is in China.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
They're crazy. We get killed over here for doing that and saying that. Why do they do that in America? But really it is. I think the Chinese are, now that they're becoming capitalistic, mm-hmm. they're looking at what we do and how we do it here. They're amazed at our free speach.
It's a lot different over there.
Yeah, I mean, we can say, just I was gonna say, we can say whatever we want and not have to worry about it. That's really not true, but we want you to believe it is. In the land of the free and the home of the brave. But climate change is this discussion for, I guess, the next 45 minutes, if you'll tolerate me.
Yeah. Now we'll talk about it.
Who dressed you today?
I did. Is it aggravating you?
No, actually, it's nice. I'm just thinking that I would think it would take a good woman to put a tie like this on you. Check out that tie.
Well, I don't know.
Look at that. That is really.
This tie, believe it or not, it's about 15 or 20 years old.
You look aristocratic with that.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, you do, dude.
That's certainly not the
really
case.
Cool.
See, I got a couple of phrases in here.
I mean, like, I don't have a man crush or anything, but it's a nice tie. Patrick, how long have you been doing meteorology?
A little over 31 years now.
Wow. Where were you schooled?
Florida State, down in Tallahassee. And from there, worked at a small station down in South Georgia for about 6 months at WALB. And then I worked at the Weather Channel for 4 years.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
What prompted you to get into meteorology? What excited you about it?
I always enjoyed in Louisiana, and it was hurricanes and different types of weather, and so I was always interested in it. And I played athletics as a kid, and got to the point where my athletic career was not going to be able to get advanced. In fact, I had an accident where had a construction accident, and from there I thought I was going to play some college ball, and it didn't work out. And I said, well, I'd like to study meteorology if I couldn't do athletics, and really enjoyed what people did on the air. And I thought, the study of the atmosphere, which is meteorology, was fascinating. And so that's what I decided to study.
Always changing. Mm-hmm. You really do have to be a scientist to be a good meteorologist, because there's so much going on in the atmosphere, especially in Chattanooga. But what excited you more, the idea of the prediction, watching the weather, being a weather newscaster? Did you envision yourself being on television?
I did, but it was a part of a competitiveness that I had playing athletics. And you want to be competitive with your forecast, because obviously you want to win, you want to get it right. And it's one of those things to where it's just not cut and dry. It's not saying, well, I know what it's going to be like tomorrow, guaranteed, because nothing's a guarantee. But to get as close as possible and to try to be as accurate as possible, it's almost like trying to win a game. And you got little mini games. You got 365 games a year. And so every day you have a game where you're trying to forecast properly what, we're trying to expect weather-wise.
And you never take a day off. I mean, you're on this station 7 days a week. You're just always working. What does it take to make a good meteorologist?
A love and a persistence and a hunger to want to do better. I can remember when I was growing up back in the 70s, you'd watch a guy on television, and at the end of his forecast, he'd have a 3-day forecast. And, he'd have these charts and magnets and grease pins and all this kind of stuff. And it was a 3-day forecast, and everybody was always looking forward to that 3-day forecast. And, in southern Louisiana, you got the same 3-day forecast during the summer, partly cloudy, hot, scattered showers, highs of around 92. And I'm thinking, you know what? Eventually, we're going to do better than that. And over the last 30 or 40 years, technology has allowed us to learn and to grow and to get better at our craft. And, now instead of doing a 3-day forecast, we're allowed to do a 7-day forecast. And, it gets adjusted every day that you get closer to that 7th day. But it's good to have that guide where people can plan ahead of time. And sometimes we get maps that go out 10, 12, 14 days. You even get maps that go out 6 months. But really, you just take those with a grain of salt. You're trying to win the 7-day battle. And so that's where it's a lot different than what it was. And I want to point this out, since today is D-Day. This is the anniversary, I think the 70, whatever, third or whatever, since it was 1944 and June 6th. That was perhaps the greatest forecast in history, because they had to get that forecast right within a 6 or 7 hour window in order to make that mission successful. If they were off just a little bit, it would have been a total disaster, and we may be in a different world than what we're in. But perhaps the greatest forecast in history was made 2 days before D-Day.
Yeah, and for anyone under 50, because they probably don't teach this in school, D-Day was the day that all the Allied forces converged on France to start fighting back the Germans, back to Germany. And the weather was a hindrance at that time.
Yeah, they had several problems. In fact, they had to postpone, and there's a lot of fog. There's a lot of variables that, today on a satellite, we can detect that. They didn't have that kind of technology.
You wonder how they did it without satellite technology.
They were bold. They studied. They had a lot of experience. You had a team of people, so you had more than one head trying to figure it out. And they made a gutsy gamble, and it paid off. And to this day, this is probably one of the greatest forecasts ever, ever assembled to make something successful.
We do want to honor our fallen soldiers too for that big sacrifice. They knew they weren't coming back.
No, they knew that. And you wonder, and I don't want to stray off too much, you wonder if we could do that today.
Well, we're going to be getting into the nitty-gritty of exactly what climate change is. But to me, it's important to talk to the man that's lived this weather. It's part of your persona. You live the weather. You understand meteorology. You've done it for over 30 years. You know when there's a fish in the room. You can smell it. Where we're just overwhelmed with information. We smell a lot of stink on the internet, but sometimes we don't know which is good stink or bad stink. But this is what you do as a scientist, as a meteorologist. Forecasting, and I think one of the most difficult parts of the country, which is Chattanooga. This is a very, very difficult area to forecast in. Being from the Philadelphia area, it was really easy. The systems come west to east. Whatever happened 2 days ago, we're going to get 2 days later, except when there's a nor'easter coming from the south. Yeah. The old timers knew that because the wind would fly, the wind would push everything up the river, so they knew there was a nor'easter coming. Down south, had a radio station down there. Didn't even do the weather. It was the same every day, mix of sun and clouds with a chance of showers. But now, like you're saying with forecasting, they can tell you where the thunderstorms are, where they're going to be. They can micromanage the weather.
That's the key, and that's what the biggest advance that we've made in the last 10, 15 years is that instead of saying, there's a 30% chance of afternoon showers and storms, we can do a better job. I don't use percentages. I never have. I don't think that is fair to the public.
I hate percentages.
I would rather tell somebody.
I love that you don't do that.
I'd rather tell somebody we may have it between, let's say, midnight and 6 o'clock in the morning. Right. It's going to move from west to east, and by lunchtime, it'll be out of the way. that tells a story where it can relate to somebody.
You're painting pictures.
Yeah, and they can plan for the rest of their day on what they want to do.
Chattanooga is a very difficult area because you put it in meteorological terms. But if you're on Lookout Mountain, you're over 2,000 feet. If you're on Signal Mountain, you're about 2,000 feet. Or you're in Saudi Daisy, you're at sea level. And then you have all the mountainous areas converging. I mean, how in the world can you predict the weather even a day out with all those factors? How do you do that? Even with satellite imaging and computers, how do you personally do that?
Well, you have trends, and around here you have probably about 8 or 10 different climates, like you were talking about. But folks who live in these areas, generally, if they've lived there for a while, they understand that if Chattanooga is going to be 90, on Lookout it's going to be 85. On Signal it's going to be 86. So, whenever we're doing these forecasts on a typical daily basis, whenever you have a high, like say today, we're going to be about 82. The mountains, you'll stay in the upper 70s.
Right.
And so I don't want to say it's a given, but there's been enough data and enough, climatology to where, that's when you study the weather for such a long time and they give you these stats and figures. And basically you kind of know what a certain area is going to be. And then you try to tackle, well, okay, if it's like that today, what's going to happen tomorrow? What's upstream? What's to the northwest? Sometimes in the tropics, what's coming in the southeast coming our way? Very rare around here, but every now and then you get into that. But 9 times out of 10, our weather will come from the west, either northwest or southwest. And so you look upstream and see what the jet stream is going to be bringing you. And fortunately for us, just for an example, the next 2 or 3 days are actually going to be pretty pleasant. It's not going to feel like June. We'll be close to 80 degrees, lows upper 50. So, that's something that and the jet stream is going to bring it down, and we're confident of this forecast. Now, day 7, day 8, day 9, confidence shrinks a little bit. So you need to study that a little bit more. Give it your best shot on what patterns like this have shown over the last 10, 15, 20 years. You go by that. And then you can kind of get into what the climate change and what people think of that. Because sometimes when people talk climate change, they look at something that's happened in the last 5, 10, 15 years. Climate change has happened for thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of years. It's happened ever since God created the heaven and the earth.
But the question is, how political is it?
Well,
and we're going to be talking about that.
Yeah. But the climate's always changed.
Right.
When somebody says, "Oh," they use that term, and that's kind of a catch-all term. But the climate has changed for a long, long time. In fact, back in the 70s, I can remember even on Time Magazine Newsweek, they started exclaiming that the coming ice age is coming closer because we had 2 or 3 cold winters. You cannot assume a certainty and a thought or a belief, like some assume a certainty and a belief over a 3 or 4 year period, over a 5 or 10 year period, over a 20-year period. These things take hundreds of years, sometimes thousands of years. We're dealing with a big, big planet here and a big, big solar system, a big sun that is producing sunspots and lack of sunspots and all these things that contribute to a lot of this. And so you get down to the certain degree to where everybody believes in climate change. When people say, oh, they don't believe in climate change, that's just a political or a media type point that some people are wanting to get through their agenda. Climate change has happened. It will always happen. Now, how much has man contributed to that? That's the, $1 trillion question when it comes to giving our money to somebody else.
Patrick Core, meteorologist, scientist, TV weather person of Channel 12, and he's on at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Did I miss anything?
No, that's it for right now.
And on our station, at least 3 times an hour at Nooga Radio, AM 1240, 92.7, NoogaRadio.com. You can click on NoogaRadio.com and go to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter at Nooganomics.com, Nooga Radio, AM 1240, 92.7. There is a political element, Patrick, to this climate change. And as you said, I remember being in radio in the 70s that they touted global cooling, that the Earth was cooling. It was in science magazines too, that we're going into a new ice age. And they based it on a 10-year cycle, 10,000-year cycle. But every 10,000 years, we go through a cycle whereby it's a mini ice age. Well, it's my belief, and correct me if I'm wrong, that politicians, bureaucrats, individuals that had an agenda to actually tax the air you breathe, because that's one thing that isn't taxed as of yet. Maybe in other parts of the world, but if it wasn't for Trump and not signing those Paris Accords, they'd be taxing the air you breathe. But got the idea of, we're going into a cooling phase. How can we blame humans? And then in the 80s, it was a warming phase. How can we blame humans? And then the 90s and 2000s, everything got confused. So let's just call it climate change and blame it on the human being and their carbon footprint. Now, I know you don't want to get into too much of the political end of it, which is a multi-trillion, not billion, trillion-dollar industry. If they convince you that you're a bad person when you're born and you've got a carbon footprint, you can still pollute, but you have to pay for it or exchange credits through the credit exchange that Gore's a part of in Chicago, Illinois. That's a long question, and I'm going to make it a little shorter. My question to you is, as a meteorologist and scientist, is there real climate change? And that is to say, is the Earth really warming? Is the Earth really cooling? Or is this just cyclical?
Well, it's both. It warms and it cools in a cycle, but we're talking thousands and millions of years that it does this. And I think when people, it's very, very dangerous when people politicize science, especially politicize the weather, because they don't, I don't think, understand the amount or the hugeness of what's going on. If the climate wants to change, let me just put this in a simple term. If people think they can control the climate, that is a sense of arrogance that really is troubling. If the climate wants to change, we need to do our best, just for our families, for our children, grandchildren, to leave it the way we had it. That's natural. But when you politicize it and you try to put mandates on something, it's not going to change the way the climate is going to change. The climate is going to want to change, and you're not going to be able to stop it. You can put all these measures in effect, and it may do this a little bit, but for what you're going to pay for that, it's not going to do enough to do any good. You need to adjust to the way the climate changes. Now you can do that,
but we know
there's you cannot change the climate.
We know
there's cannot change.
Right, but we know there's a political agenda that tells people if you pay, we'll change the climate and make it better, make it good.
Yeah.
We can save the Earth, and you're saying that's ridiculous.
I think it's very, very. We don't even know to what extent man is contributing to this. Man may be contributing to it to a certain point, but we don't have solid facts. The last 15 years, we haven't had a lot of so-called warming like what they were talking about. You have a lot of people who are not meteorologists, and I will, let the public imagine who they are. There are three big spokesmen of climate change: Al Gore, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Bill Nye.
They're not meteorologists like you. They're not scientists, and they in essence devalue your work.
I don't know. I don't know what's in there. They have a belief, and but what they have predicted 10, 15 years ago, that all these things would happen 2010, 2015, have not occurred. I think they need to have a huge understanding that we are dealing with the climate. That is huge. That is something that you can't just micromanage.
Are these guys being paid off? I know the originator of the Weather Channel is saying
John Coleman
has come out and he goes, this thing's a fraud. There's no such thing as climate change is being touted by these politicians. And this is I'm just guessing here that now NBC owns the Weather Channel, and I see more propaganda on the Weather Channel and less weather. Less weather, more propaganda. And that's a shame. That really is a shame.
Yeah.
What have they done to your channel? And let me just...
It's been 28 years since I've worked there, but things have changed, and things change because of ownership, and they have every right to put on whatever they want to do. Now, I may not agree with it, but I guess when somebody profits off of something, an idea, and doesn't walk the walk that they talk, I could respect somebody if they have a true belief that there is a man-made influence and that they live like that. But if they get on their jets, if they live in their 40,000, square foot mansions, and their so-called carbon footprint is thousands of times that we are, and they're trying to tell us what to do, that disturbs me and that troubles me. If they're true believers and they're saying, hey, instead of going to fly my personal jet, I'm going to call somebody, at least I can respect that they're really they have a belief in it. But I think now people are trying to profit off of the idea, and money.
Money talks.
Money talks.
Climate. China is one of the biggest polluters. One of the biggest polluters. America put in $1 billion into an exchange to fight, in quotations here, I ain't doing this, but we'll do air quotes, climate change. China put in nothing. France put in nothing. England put in nothing. This is about the redistribution of America's wealth. And what should we do, Patrick, when we see websites touting the idea that there's man out there affecting the globe, that we're hurting the globe, we're hurting ourselves, but don't support it with data? They're giving an opinion. They don't support it with data, to the point where my daughter, when she was in 4th grade 4 or 5 years ago, brought a science book home that said the sunspot cycle is 22 years. Spoke with her teacher and said, it's 11, not 22. She goes, it's 22. I said, it's not 22, it's 11. It's a misprint. She apologized a week later. The publisher put it, and this went to how many tens of thousands of children, that the sunspot cycle is 22 years, not 11. I mean, is 11 years, not 22. And that's one little mistake a layman, non-meteorologist like I picked up. So is there any telltale sign that we're looking at propaganda and not facts?
Sure. Yeah. In today's world, there are so many ways of getting information. Just touch of the finger, and everybody can have a website. Everybody has that. It's the freedom, but you just got to be really, really careful. And you touched on it before. You got to be really careful and talk to your children on what they're coming home and learning, because not everything they learn is correct, especially when it comes to, what's being taught when it comes to science and meteorology and the climate right now. Now, I have no problem if a teacher says, yeah, the climate is changing. Man, we don't know, may have something to do with it. It's a possibility. I can buy that. But when it's straight fact and they call this settled science, you've probably heard of that term. It's not settled science. There's a lot for us to learn. We learn stuff every day. Last year...
There's even space weather.
Yeah. But last year, people were blaming the drought and the heat that we had last summer and fall on climate change or what man has done. What's happened this spring? We're 6 2/3 inches above normal. Things happen. Back in the 20s and 30s, didn't they have the Dust Bowl over in Oklahoma? Didn't they have, didn't we have, big cooling out in the 1700s? Didn't we have another cooling in the 1400s? We had so much going on.
Patrick Kaur is with us from TV 12. Patrick's a meteorologist and scientist. Nooga Radio, AM 1240. Back after these.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Need a tiller to get things going for the spring? Spiff up your porch, maybe your deck? Come on by and get a pressure washer at Action Rental. Family in town, need some tables and chairs for an event? Come on by and see us. Action Rental. This is Dan at Action Rental on Lee Highway. Come by and see me. Action Rentals.
IBuyChattanoogaHouses.com, Chattanooga's premier house buyer. Do you have a house you need to sell fast? We're buying. Call us today. We are local folks. We will buy your house as is, no repairs needed. We will give you a cash offer and close on the day of your choice. Call us right now, 423-834-7321. Need to sell a house fast? We are buying. Are you experiencing one of these situations? Inherited a house you have no need for? Behind on your property taxes? Nightmare tenants making your life miserable? Too many repairs needed and don't have a desire to fix? Behind on payments and facing foreclosure? Recently divorced and need a way out of the house? Never really wanted to be a landlord and just want to cash out? Trying to relocate and need to sell your house? Do you need to sell a house fast? We are buying. No fees, no hassles, no repair costs. Close on the day of your choice. Our process is simple. Call us today. We inspect your property right away. We make you a fair cash offer. We close on the day of your choice. Call us today, 423-834-7321. Visit our website, IBuyChattanoogaHouses.com. Call us today, 423-834-7321. IBuyChattanoogaHouses.com.
Need windows? Hey folks, do you need new windows? Good news. Window Depot of Chattanooga has a great special going on right now. 10 high-quality, energy-efficient double-hung vinyl windows installed for only $29.90. That's right, 10 double-hung vinyl windows, only $2,990. And yes, they qualify for the TVA rebates. Call 894-0011. Window Depot of Chattanooga today, located at 5950 Shaliford Road. Call 894-0011 today.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM's news now.
A new addition to the TBI's top 10 most wanted list is believed to be armed and dangerous and on the loose. David Evans Jr. is from Kentucky, but he's wanted in Tennessee after deputies say he fired at them and evaded arrest. The last round of interviews for the new superintendent of county schools is beginning today. Dr. Wayne Johnson will be interviewed this week. Final decision is set for June the 15th. The names of the two men who were found dead over the weekend in Ringgold have been released. 16-year-old Montana Witten and 20-year-old Adam Alegi. Their deaths seem to have happened on Sunday at a home on Post Oak Road in Ringgold when Witten's mother broke down his bedroom door and found the two men dead inside. Investigators believe it was a drug overdose. A medical examiner will make a final decision, but that could take weeks. More road closures today. Riverside Drive between Martin Luther King Boulevard westbound and the Veterans Bridge. It's going to be closed for the festival. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News, now.
Slowly drying out through your afternoon with some lingering clouds around. Highs 81 to 83 tonight. Clearing, comfortable overnight. Lows 59 to 61. Now for your Wednesday, a beautiful day. Sunshine, highs of around 80. Partly cloudy, upper 70s on Thursday. It's time for Riverbend, June 9th through the 17th. Discounted admission now at area Circle K locations. Savings on tokens at Food City. With more information at their website, riverbendfestival.com. And I'm Storm Team 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Moore on Nooga Radio AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
I want to thank Patrick Moore for doing that weather forecast that was pre-recorded. I should have just
done it live.
I should have just had you do it live, or at least move your lips while it was on. Welcome aboard AM 1240 92.7, NoogaRadio.com. Go to NoogaRadio.com and click on our YouTube page, Facebook page, Twitter. We're all over the place. So it's really nice to have you aboard. We appreciate it. Patrick Core from TV 12 is with us. You can see Patrick 6 o'clock news, 7 o'clock news, the 11 o'clock news. And I want to thank you again for inviting me to be the guest
fun,
DJ. Man, that was a blast. I've never done that. No, I don't know about that, but it was fun.
Yeah, that's all that matters, right?
The good guys and the bad guys. The low pressure was the bad guys. High pressure. I got that from Jim O'Brien.
Yeah.
Jim O'Brien is the legendary weathercaster in Philadelphia Channel 6, and he died in an accident jumping out of an airplane. But boy, was he funny. He would have, this is before satellites and digital screens. He'd have the good guys have the smile on their face.
Yeah.
The high pressure, and the bad guys would have.
I remember those days.
But he was doing what you do. That's why I love your forecast. He wasn't talking about percentages. He was painting pictures.
Well, you want to tell people what they're going to be expecting to do. Like if a kid has a ball game Saturday morning, they want to know, well, what's it going to be like for that ball game?
Right.
Or if you have, church Sunday morning, well, do I need an umbrella to go to church? And so you try to picture what you think somebody's going to be doing and try to kind of mold that forecast around their activity. That's something I learned a long time.
Patrick, you work for a corporation. I work for myself. I'm a big mouth. I've worked for myself since 93 and owning stations because no one will hire me. And if they do, they'll fire me because I say what I want to say when I want to say it. And hopefully the truth. And I've called climate change a fraud since the late 70s, early 80s, because I haven't seen one shred of scientific data to back it up. I think they're a bunch of thugs, criminals, creeps, and liars. It's a total fraud, and it's there to scam the American public. Now, that's coming from me. That's not coming from Patrick. Patrick is here as an independent, objective meteorologist and scientist to back up what I say. No. To just talk about the weather and really not the politics of it. But let's get into a little bit of the politics of the weather, because weather right now is political, is it not? With big business mixing with meteorology. What are your thoughts on that?
It has been political the last 10, 15, 20 years. And the more it becomes political, it seems like the less objective you can be whenever you want to talk about something. Because
Patrick, can I just tell you, I was shocked that you were willing to come on the show. And I was worried for you because this is so politically hot. I was worried for you. And didn't we, prior to this, I said, are you sure you want to talk about this? Because, I mean, people lose their jobs over not bowing down to Al Gore's climate change propaganda. So I was worried for you.
Well, you have meteorologists that, are not convinced that they're settled science. And if you would take a survey of private meteorologists that work in what they call private sector.
What's the difference?
Chances are,
What's the difference?
Obviously, I work for the private sector. I work for a company. I work for something that's not really, I guess, associated with the government per se.
Not NASA.
NASA or NOAA or the National Weather Service, which they do a great job day in and day out. They give us warnings. They give us forecast guidance. They give us all sorts of great things.
Which, by the way, they come under the Privacy Acts now.
Yeah.
For some reason, they put NOAA and NASA under Privacy Acts now for individuals. And that concerns me. But okay,
but
you say there's a distinction between
there is, and
private and
because
public.
I'm not working for the government. Some of the people, or all of the people in the National Weather Service, are working for their government employees. So if you took a survey on private meteorologists or people who work in the private sector on their thoughts of man-made climate change, you'd probably get a lot different opinion than if you took a survey of folks who were working for the public or the government or extreme big business. So there's a separation there.
And what do you think the reason for that is?
Well, I think some who work for the government, I don't know if they may feel a little intimidation or a little pressure, but they may not be able to state their views, their honest views. I don't know, but
And with this new president, I think that may change now.
Well, we'll see. And I think there was a lot of hysteria last week when he pulled out of the Paris Accord, and I don't understand it. And my fellow, my former employee, was really, I guess they had a lot to say about that as well. And I was disappointed because when I read exactly what was in the agreement, I'm thinking it's not going to change the climate because some of the biggest polluters were not being asked to do anything until 2030. And we were asked to do a lot of things and pay a lot of money and do a lot of things where it may harm our economy. And I'm thinking, we're being asked to do so much. The bigger polluters weren't asked to do nearly anything. And one other thing I just wanted to mention is that, you know, our country, we have had so much, I guess, innovation in cleaning our air. Chattanooga used to be the dirtiest city in the country in the 60s and 70s. Now we're one of the cleanest. You know,
I don't see any pollution in America. I mean, I travel all.
Oh, we have pollution. You have smog in California and places like that, but it's not to the extent that you have in China.
No.
And I think the private sector, most times, I don't want to say every time, but most times will correct these things. And you know what? If there's a solar panel out there that's cheap enough where it's going to generate electricity to where I don't have to pay the power bill, then you'll have the scales tip and everybody will buy that.
Right.
But until that happens, I don't think we should be mandated in trying to do that because of climate change, because buying a solar panel across the country is not going to solve climate change.
Well, let's talk about the definition of climate change. What are we defining climate change as?
Climate change is when the climate changes over a period of time from one place to another.
And at this point, we don't know whether the climate is warming or cooling. We know Al Gore lied that the ice caps are not melting because I visit Florida often and the sea level hasn't risen in over 10,000 years. And that's at sea level. So we know that he's a liar. So are we cooling? Are we warming? Or is it just cyclical? What actually is climate change?
Well, the weather is cyclical. And some ice caps can lose, but other ice caps, maybe in Antarctica, gain. So, you know, it's always reported when an ice cap is losing its mass, but it's very rarely reported when an ice cap is growing. And so you got to be really, really careful about that.
As a meteorologist, let me ask you this, and scientist, is the Earth cooling or is it warming or neither? Or yes?
Well, yeah, we have warmed over the last 20 years. There's no doubt about it. We have warmed. We cooled 50 years ago or 60 years ago. Right. But you have these ebbs and flows, and
when you're saying we, you mean the United States or Chattanooga?
The country has warmed in the last 10, 15 years. But
that's a good thing.
Well, I don't
warm up, man. If you warm up, the plants are going to grow. Sure. You have more oxygen.
Well,
that's a good thing.
And you get into the CO2 discussion too.
That's a bumper sticker. Warm, baby, warm.
Yeah. And you know, in 20, 30 years, you may cool down. We don't know, and that's what's so dangerous about people making predictions for something to happen 10 years out. We have a tough enough time making a prediction 7 days out. So when somebody makes a prediction 10 years out who's not a meteorologist,
right,
you got to really wonder what their agenda or what they're trying to create with that sort of agenda. And a lot of people have profited off of this agenda, which is troubling. That's all I can say.
Sounds to me like you're saying don't tie pollution into the weather.
Well,
don't tie it into the weather.
Well, you can. Yeah, you can, because when you have pollutants, obviously you don't have as much solar radiation getting down to the earth. When you have volcanoes explode, you know, you have ash and things like that and pollutants. And you need, obviously, you can't just run wild and let everybody just do anything they want to do. You got to have a certain means.
God forbid we do that. That's called freedom.
Yeah, well, you want to have, but you want to have their freedom, but you got to make sure that things are not harmful to the individual on a daily basis.
You don't want your next door neighbor burning rubber tires.
Well, yeah,
on his lot next to your house.
Yeah, obviously. But I don't want anybody coming on my property and seeing a little ant and say that's in danger and say, well, I got to take this property because of that.
So, well, it's typical of what happens in America is the being moderate has gone. We're fanatical in every area, in sex, in drinking, now in weather. We're so fanatical. We know the world's coming to an end now. because of warming and cooling, and when really we shouldn't be fanatical about it.
No, and people can have discussions. I don't mind. I have a lot of friends who believe that man has done a lot to the climate in the last 50 years, and they have their beliefs, and I don't mind discussing them. I don't want to be labeled a hater or whatever because I don't have that belief or I have another belief, and I don't want to do the same to them. I don't think that's fair.
We have Prozac for them. We have Zoloft, and I can recommend them to a therapist.
Yeah.
But how about exploding nuclear weapons in the upper atmosphere, thousands of them, for 20 years? Governments did that. If anything affected the climate and affected the ozone, is blowing nuclear weapons up in the upper atmosphere. How crazy were these people?
Yeah, I don't know what. When it comes to, but
me cooking a barbecue, I don't have a carbon footprint when I cook a hot dog on a barbecue and it goes up into the air.
Yeah. I guess since I'm a Christian who's a meteorologist, that comes first.
Oh boy, you're really in trouble.
Yeah, well,
a Christian meteorologist that doesn't believe in climate change.
Well, no, I think I look at it as a bigger thing, and we talked about it in Sunday school, and I told him, I said, God is in control. God is in control of this. If he, and he created something that was pretty tough and pretty durable, and it would take a lot for us to do something to destroy it. And he, it doesn't say that we can just go carte blanche and then destroy everything we want.
Right.
We are supposed to be stewards of what we are.
Absolutely.
But when people say that something's going to happen in 10 years, that Miami Beach is going to be underwater in 10 years, they just don't have the research, and they don't have the climatology of studying hundreds and hundreds of years to make that claim verifiable. And they made that claim in the late 90s and early 2000s.
And I'm looking at the downside of that, and I don't see a downside of that.
Well,
of Miami being underwater or California. What's the downside? Even New York.
And I don't think,
one
thing, I don't think property values along the beach have gone down, have they?
Not that I know of. Even though they could be hit by another Andrew.
But I'm just saying, if all the beach was being taken away this quickly, wouldn't property values go down to zero?
Absolutely.
So, you kind of look at it and you look at reality. A forecast for 10 years is very, very tough, especially by someone who's not a meteorologist.
TV weathercaster, meteorologist, scientist for over 30 years, Patrick Core is with me. I'm so honored to have him here. He does the weather at least 3 times an hour on this very radio station, Nooga Radio 92.7, AM 1240, all over the web, noogaradio.com, TV channel 12. You have to tune into it, 6, 6:30, 7 o'clock, and 11 o'clock newscast. That 11-year sunspot cycle, to me, is one of the biggest factors of not only radio communications with the ozone, but in the change of weather. That what actually, I'm sure many people haven't heard this, and El Nino. What actually happens to the sun in that 11-year cycle? I know there's a solar weather forecast too that affects the weather on Earth. As a scientist, can you explain that to me?
I can make it pretty easy, just in layman's terms, within 30 seconds. The sun does not burn at a constant temperature 24/7 for hundreds of thousands and millions of years. It gives off heat, throws off. You ever see these pictures, especially in movies of the sun? You got these flames going out and bursts going out. That's basically typically what we're doing. We're looking at a ball of fire, a big star that we studied as kids. And it's the closest star to us that gives us our warmth. And so it does not burn at a constant temperature. And so that is our source of heat. And when it burns, I say a little cooler. And when we say a little cooler, we're talking minute, because it's not going to cool 3 degrees or anything like that. Very, very minutely, it could affect us a little bit bigger, because the Earth is so much smaller than the sun.
And sometimes it causes power outages.
Sure. And if you have something that's so much, so hot, but yet it cools just a little bit, it can influence our climate for that 11 period. And then once it regenerates and gets that heat again, then it gives us a different type of cycle. And weather runs in cycle. It always has, and it always will.
Because that sunspot is a cooler spot on the sun.
Yeah.
That's rotating in an 11-year period. And scientists really, from what I've read, haven't figured the entire sunspot cycle out. They don't totally get it. All they know that it's a cooler spot, but they really haven't figured out why it's 11 years and all the effects of that sunspot. All they've been able to say is it does affect our weather.
It does, because the sun does not burn at a constant temperature every single minute of the day. And that tends to, I guess, gives us different climates, different cycles of climates. And you have El Niños and La Niñas and warmings of the water.
What is an El Niño?
El Niño is a warming of the water out in the Pacific that happens about every 2 to 3 years. And when it does that, it causes our winters to become usually a little bit milder.
Is that because the jet stream also dips?
It
or
doesn't
does it rise?
It doesn't allow the jet to get as deep to the south,
okay, so
because with that warm water out in the
Gotcha,
Pacific,
gotcha.
you have a more active weather pattern.
Okay.
And so you get more of the southern jet coming through, and that keeps that northern jet bottled up to the north. And so our weather is usually a little bit milder, especially along the Gulf Coast, usually a little bit wetter as well. So that's something, and that's a cycle that happens, and we are very aware of that. When you don't have an El Nino, you have a La Nina, which is the opposite, equal and opposite. That means you have a cooling of waters out there, and sometimes that means you can get a little bit cooler winter that we had in the early part of this decade. 2013, 14, we had good snows, had some good winters to where we had cold weather.
The sun taking, this is amazing, 8 minutes to reach the earth. The warmth of the sun, that sunlight takes 8 minutes to reach the earth. That's how far away it is, traveling at 186,000 miles a second. So to me, it seems that any minute sunburst or cycle could impact us greatly on Earth and can impact the weather pattern when it starts, and correct me if I'm wrong, at the North Pole. Isn't that where all weather starts, at the North Pole?
Well, not all weather, but all weather in the Northern Hemisphere. The Southern Hemisphere, it does the opposite, because high pressure here is cyclonic, or rotates in a clockwise manner. Low pressure is counterclockwise. In the Southern Hemisphere, for Australians, it's the opposite.
Okay.
So, you have a lot of, I don't want to say the weather always derives from the poles, because we have weather that derives from the tropics, not too far from the equator.
Is weather not also affected by magnetism and magma in the earth, where the earth is? Now they're saying that the power of the earth is unlimited, that we have a nuclear power plant at the center of the earth that's generating constant magma, and that even the north-south poles may switch, north being south, south being north. But how affected is weather by the magnetic pole of the north and south? Not
any more than it has the last million years.
Okay.
The Earth has not changed much.
It's only been here 16,000 years, so you're saying.
Yeah. Well, I guess you mean,
though.
yeah, maybe 16,000 years, but in God's day, the 7 days were according to his time, and a day could have lasted 1,000,000 years according to what he wanted it to be.
And Patrick, I
don't know. I'm not smart. That's above my pay grade.
Yeah, you are. But I love what you said about adapting and adopting to the environment of the earth. And when people want me to camp, not RV camp, but like real camp, I'm like, it took us 16,000 years to get inside with no bugs and air conditioning. I'm not going outside and camping with bugs and then mosquito. Are you crazy? So we've learned to adapt and adopt the environment instead of trying to change. Well, we have manipulated it with dams and some minor effects, and they're very minor, because it seems like the earth will always reclaim itself.
It will, and you've had some, especially where I'm from in Louisiana, you had the Corps of Engineers do what it can to keep the Mississippi River from moving from the port of New Orleans.
What happened with Katrina?
Well,
what in the world went on where it was a perfect merging and a 5, and what happened?
Well, it's something that has been studied. We did research on. We knew it was a big possibility if a storm of that magnitude got close. The biggest threat New Orleans always has is high water.
Right.
Not the wind, but high water. The reason why is New Orleans is 6 feet below sea level.
Oh, wow.
And it is, you know how we are above sea level, but we are surrounded by mountains and ridges. Do you have to go to a break?
No.
Okay.
I do, but I'm not.
New Orleans is surrounded by levees from 3 bases of water. The Gulf of Mexico, there's a lake called Lake Pontchartrain, and there's the Mississippi River. So they are basically surrounded by water, and they have all these levees that are keeping the water where it is and out of the city. So whenever one of these levees fails and they don't have a proper pumping system, then there's nowhere that water goes. It goes in the bowl. And that's exactly what happened.
How frustrating is it for you as a meteorologist and scientist when you give a forecast or you see forecasts given and the people don't take it seriously? And I remember with Katrina, they were not taking it seriously.
Well, it's hard to tell people what to do. And so many times people have forecasts of tropical storms, and then they say, well, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. That's the old term people use. Same thing with Hurricane Sandy up in the Northeast, which affected New Jersey and New York.
Yeah.
You know, you have to heed the warnings. Things have happened. There's a possibility. I learned a long time ago, when you forecast snow around here, it doesn't always snow. But you want to give people your thoughts on what you think will happen or what are the possibilities that will happen. Every time that a tornado warning is issued, doesn't mean that there's an actual tornado in that county. But we want to indicate that the threat is there, the conditions are right, and this is a possibility. We are here for a service. Our service is to inform and to keep people safe.
And it happens quickly.
Especially with severe weather, tornadoes, snow,
it's there.
Things like that. Hurricanes,
yeah.
We can see them on satellite. Satellite does not lie. So we see them and we can track them days and days and days at times. This storm was a strong storm. It moved where we basically thought it was going to move. The levee system and the dam system and the pump system could not take the water. Once it breaks, it's hard to stop.
I was amazed. I've been radio forever, and then other floodplains, people just ignore it. But this was one, and I can tell you, this is one of the reasons I distrust government or bureaucracy, is we were there broadcasting in Florida, and we knew we were on the Gulf Coast, that we were going to go off the air. All the stations were along the coast, and I called the commission, and I said, this storm is going to knock every single radio station off, all the cell towers and TV. The people will have no way of getting communications. Will you allow us to broadcast from the studio 20 miles in? You know what they said? No. When Katrina hit.
Why?
They didn't give a reason. They said no. It would be illegal. When Katrina hit, we all went off the air up the coast. 3 days stations weren't on the air. I had to actually take a boat in, put a generator to get us back on the air, and refill that generator every 6 hours. But that took 12 hours. Somebody could have died in the meantime. After Katrina, now you can file for what's called an STA and basically, hang Christmas trees on your tower if you want. But it took that disaster for these bureaucrats and politicians to respond. So I'm going to say, don't trust your weather radio. No. Trust Patrick Core.
No,
because he's. I'm telling you.
I think you should trust. You have to trust the weather radio too. I don't think that's.
This is my personal opinion. I'd much rather trust my local guy who's there.
But if people have nothing else, you have to. I'm not saying don't have a weather radio, because a warning is a warning, and if they can't get me or can't get the other meteorologists on the other stations, they need to have information. And so but
don't be lulled into a false sense of security, because we have given warnings when my weather radio has not gone off.
Yeah.
Channel 12 has given weather warnings when the weather radio is not going off. So I'm saying have one, but don't just trust that.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have information, and it's good to know, try to know what's going to happen before it's happened. So if we think that conditions are right for something to happen, sometimes we know 4, 5, 6, maybe 12, 14 hours ahead of time.
And Channel 12 does have a weather app.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Storm Team 12.
Team 12. It's a great app.
Yeah.
I love the way you can zoom right down. You'd actually watch the storm in your area coming in. It's a great app. Patrick, thank you so much for coming along, buddy.
Hey, well, thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me on Channel 12. I'm sure your viewership and your numbers went down, but it was fun.
It went up.
Patrick Gore, meteorologist, scientist.
Thank you, Sam.
Channel 12 television. Check him out tonight. at the 6 o'clock cast. He does the first weather forecast in the market at 6 and at, well, it's actually 7 too, right? For the central time zone, but you can pick it up here.
Sure.
And the 11 o'clock hour. Once again, thank you, Patrick. Have a great day.
Herd with Colin Cowherd starts now.
This is The Herd, wherever you may be and however you may be listening, live in Los Angeles, iHeartRadio, Fox Sports Radio, and FS1. Christine Leahy is joining me for the final hour today. Cedric Saballo stops by. Dean Blandino was on. Jason McIntyre, Steven Jackson stopped by. It is 2-0. Cavs trail the Warriors in the series, game 3, and really the deciding game in this series, because if Cleveland doesn't win, the series is over, and I already think it is over. I just don't like how the reserves for Cleveland match up against Golden State, and I am seeing on Cleveland misses and Golden State fast break opportunities a Cleveland team that is just too lethargic and too slow-footed to keep up, and sometimes to see great, you got to see it against other great, and the matchups don't work for Cleveland, so I think the series is over, although I think the games in Cleveland are going to be a lot of fun, and I think Cleveland's going to win one of them, probably game 3. Game 3 is the game that the inferior team trailing 2-0 generally wins. It's their last gasp. They're at home. They give you everything they have. And I think there were moments in Oracle where Cleveland looked pretty competitive. You know, the other thing that just kind of cracks me up, and this just happens in sports, and I just roll my eyes at it. We tend to